Thank you, everyone. It's great to be back in India and specifically in Kerala. It's actually my second visit, but the first one to Kochi, so very exciting. Actually, I have already only 3 minutes left. Is this correct? Or is this still add-up time from the previous speaker? I gradually take this if possible. So, as you've already heard, my name is Ullrich Loeffler. I'm the CEO of Ecosystem. I will, for the next 20 minutes, not talk about AI. Yes, that's a promise. I try to mention it as little as possible. Instead, we want to talk about data and why we need to look at data beyond just the accuracy and more as a holistic, broader topic. I want to start with asking you a question. Who of you heard the phrase, data is the new currency in the digital economy? Anyone? That's good. That's pretty much all of you. And this phrase was actually coined about 15 years ago in the 2010s when, all the social, user-generated content platforms came up, IoT came up, e-commerce came up, and there was an exponential increase of data. And there was this anticipation that this data can be monetized in the future. And that also led to an escalation or an exponential increase of company valuations. At that time, any startup that had anything with data in their business plan or in their strategy got a multiplier on their business valuation for their fundraising or for their IPOs. And a lot of that has actually come true. A lot of the social media platforms have generated revenue and it is monetizable. But I want to now raise the question to you, if we believe that data is the new currency, how do we compare currency? And I've got here a 500 rupee note. And I give it to the person who answers this question correctly. What is the one attribute that you would associate with this currency, with the 500 rupees? Anyone want to give a go? There's a hint, it's actually on the slide. Trust, exactly. It's trust. I could walk off the stage, I could leave this hotel, go to any random person on the street and offer this 500 rupees in exchange of something of equal value. And that person will likely give it to me without doing a KYC process, without knowing my criminal history, without ever having met me in my life before, in his life. So it's a very, very powerful attribute to have, this kind of trust. So now if we look at the future currency, our data, shouldn't we look at the same attributes or to create the same attributes for our data assets that we have within our organizations? So let's have a quick look what actually creates trust. And sorry, I can't remember who. There was a few people saying that. Please approach me afterwards. And unfortunately, our COO only gave me a 500 rupees budget. Otherwise, I would have taken a bigger note. But this is up for you. So there's a few attributes here, or a few themes, and I will go through them on the in connection to traditional currency. But you can maybe associate in your own mind to the data currency in your organization and going forward. The first one is integrity, and that goes without saying. If there's $500 written on my note or 500 rupees, you would expect it to be 500 rupees, so that it's accurate is a given. Governance is around clear accountability and ownership around currency. In most economies, it's done by the Reserve Bank, so this is well taken care of. Transparency, the same, monetary policies, documentation, auditability. Again, reserve banks or treasury departments are taking care of that. So that's, well ticked as well. Security, privacy, looking at counterfeit notes, that there's all the money that is in there is actually legitimate, is taken care of. Consistency over time, which is actually a challenge for economies that have hyperinflation like Argentina at the moment. If I can't be sure that my 500 rupees will be 500 rupees tomorrow or next week or the next month, obviously my trust in the currency is going down. And then we've got acceptability and tolerability. The more places I can pay with this currency, the higher the trust, the higher the value. And the last one is the inclusion and literacy. So the more people have actually access to currency and feel comfortable and know how to manage their finances, the more trust is generated. So all of these themes apply in the same way to your organization, to your data as well. And if you have gone through these items and said, okay, do we tick the box with our data? There's probably a few gaps that we haven't addressed yet, or not to the same degree. But what we have learned for the last 15 years that actually data monetization and the data economy is real. And it's specifically real in India. I mean, we heard Amit, this morning about this incredible amount of innovation coming out of India, not just for the India market, but for the world. And, excuse me, being based in Singapore, I can tell you that some of the most mature economies look up to India as a benchmark for some of these initiatives. If I look at Aadhaar, the largest biometric database in the world, 1.4 billion records, and making, for example, subsidy distribution to rural areas very seamless, very secure. We have areas like UPI. I just read October was again a record-breaking month with over 16 billion transactions. Now, despite the short lifetime of UPI, it's creating 16 billion people, obviously creating an inclusive economy, generating value in itself, the transaction, but also generating a lot of value, which can be innovated on top of. And I can, I could name probably another half an hour of examples, whether it's crop in, for rural farming, whether it's the space programs, or whether it's Flipkart from an e-commerce perspective. There's a lot of innovation coming out of India, which is world-class, which is top-notch. You can be very proud of. The question that we have to ask for our organization is now, how do we plug into this data economy? How do we make sure that our enterprises accelerate within it and take advantage of the value generation that is possible? And I think that's where we're seeing a lot of shortfalls, how enterprises approach this, because in a lot of cases, and Sesh touched on that, I will go in the next slide a little bit deeper onto this, that a lot of organizations focus on data accuracy first without tackling the other boxes. And that creates a challenge. And I'll give you one example which could apply to India as well. So let's say you're a retail chain and you're creating a very, very accurate demand forecasting model. And you can forecast the demand for mango juice to the carton for the next week or for the next month. And then you're rolling it out across all your stores across the country. But suddenly, in some rural area, preferences are different. Maybe it's not mango juice, maybe it's lassi or some other buttermilk drink that is more favored. So suddenly you've got overstock of mango, you've got an understock of the preferential drink, you've got a store manager which gets stressed, and you've got customers which get unhappy and potentially go to the competition. So the focus on accuracy has neglected the context that we need to apply if we're rolling out these models across the enterprise or across the country. And there's other areas as well, like of the siloed, data stores. We've got shadow IT, as raised by Sesh as well. We've got regulatory issues. There's a whole range of issues that come if we are over-focusing on data accuracy. So then let's have a look what some of the data shows us from the survey that we ran here across India. And that's all India data. We already heard from the top that when we look at the boardroom, what are they interested in? And Amit summarized it quite nicely. It's all about risk mitigation and obviously bottom line growth, whether through revenue growth or through cost optimization. From an IT perspective or project perspective, that relates to generative AI and customer experience. And I would actually say that customer experience is very closely linked to AI. So if we could maybe agree that the two biggest priorities is risk, cybersecurity, and it is generative AI or analytics within organizations. So then we're looking, okay, what is the biggest challenges when they're implementing AI? And here we see the number one challenge is data complexity. The second one is skill. And then the third one, again, is integration. And again, I would actually link data complexity and integration into one bucket and make it a data challenge. So to summarize the key message from the slide is AI is one of the biggest priorities for most organizations. Data is one of the biggest challenges for organizations to execute and progress this strategy. So then let's dig one level deeper and say, okay, what do companies do about it? What are their priorities to overcome these challenges? And here we see that the first one is identifying business use cases, as mentioned by Sesh already. And we see that in other markets coming down a little bit in priority because now there is a long list of potential use cases. It's more to really move these use cases from pilot to production. But what we're seeing a lot, that we're finding use cases to then map the data against and find use cases that are actually executable with the data assets that we have. We're kind of finding these point connections, point solutions. The next plan is to improving data quality, adopting new data management technologies. We've got obviously governance and compliance priorities. But when we look at the percentages, we had over 50-60% of companies looking at AI, over 50-60% of companies having a challenge with data, but only 20% or 15% or 12% are actually addressing some of the broader factors that address the challenges for long-term success. And when we go down to the soft factors like upskilling our teams, tech team or a user team, we're going down to single-digit factors. So, single-digit percentages. So only like a small fraction of companies are actually addressing the elephant in the room and kind of like cutting corners, but just finding a use case, find the data for it, connecting it without leaving the holistic strategy or addressing the holistic strategy. And does this sound familiar from other approaches around our IT systems? And what has this created over time? It has created technology debt. It has created technology debt where we have favored the short-term success over the long-term growth strategy. And that means we've got a lot of debt, which we're now carrying around, which we have to reduce to then build a very agile system to move along with the digital transformation agenda. And we're now applying the same mistake to the data challenge, and we're creating data debt, which we will have to pay back at some stage in our journey going forward. So then if we're looking, okay, how do we go about addressing the data challenge a little bit more holistically? And I wanted to maybe simplify it to 6 building blocks. And the first one is really establishing a data governance framework. And this data governance framework means that we need to have very, very clear data ownership and accountability across our data assets, across our organization. We also need really, really clear policies around data quality, privacy, security, access to data as the data moves across our systems. And we need a data governance, a data governance council that oversees all our data initiatives to make sure that we are applying the right metrics. In fact, actually, Peter and I were on a call with a client in Singapore yesterday while we were here, and they had exactly this challenge. They said, look, we need to get data governance framework in place. We need to establish a council. Can you help us guide us through the process and make sure that we are applying the right policies and measures? The next one are the soft factors, which only 6 or 8% of organizations address currently, and that's looking at our teams. That's increasing the digital literacy, understanding what data means, how to do analysis, but also creating a culture internally to have a data-driven decision-making culture to really utilize the assets that are within our organization. The next one is develop a centralized data architecture, and that's easier said than done. But we need to break down the silos of data storage. We need to create an agile data layer, whether it's a data fabric, whether it's a data lake, whether it's a data warehouse. There's enough technologies out there to create a more fluent flow. Another point that is often neglected is metadata management. We work with a lot of companies where they did data migrations from one system to another or upgraded their ERP, and they're basically dumping all the same data again from the old system into the next system because it is a painful project to do. But metadata management is absolutely critical for data mapping and data discovery. So it has to be addressed, and it makes the life going forward so much easier. Next one is defining a data strategy and aligning it to the business strategy. And we've got to be clear that every strategy that we do is in our organization, whether it's a digital transformation strategy, our technology strategy, our AI strategy, our data strategy, has to align to the business strategy. And we need to find very, very clear measurements and success factors that are KPIs that are aligned to the business outcomes. And that can be revenue growth, that can be cost saving, that can be increase of NPS score, it could be a reduction of churn, customer churn, whatever it may be, but it has to be aligned to what the business wants to achieve in their strategy, and we've got to measure it along the way. Once these 4 pillars are taken care of, then we can look at the data quality. And we can look at, okay, where are the gaps? Where can we improve our data assets? How can we automate the data cleaning, the data validation? and look at ongoing audits and safe access points for the employees going forward. And then the next one is obviously once we've got this trusted data layer, then we can look at ethical AI models, whether it's customer segmentations or pricing models or demand forecasting, whatever it may be. The challenge at the moment is in most organizations, we see that they're attaching point 5 and 6 for short-term success. And short-term success is needed. We need to show to the business that there is value to be gained through data and AI. But we can't neglect the pillars 1 to 4 because we will have to pay back this data debt going forward. So I wanted to finish with one case study, which it's not new, which I came across 30 years ago when I studied in university. And that is around Rolls-Royce. And I'm not sure how many of you know this case study around the power by the hour business model, which they introduced in the 1960s, where they moved away from supplying airplane engines and parts to their customers, to the airlines. And instead, they basically shipped it out by the hour that the engine was operating, which is pretty much like the as-a-service model that we see in a lot of industries today. That was 64 years ago. The way they did this, they converted these engines into data generation engines. So they built in hundreds and thousands of sensors to generate terabytes of data in real time. In an industry like airlines, you would take it for granted that this data is accurate. It's a life and death industry. It's a highly regulated industry. So the data accuracy was obviously a hygiene factor. But how do they get the trust with their customers? The first thing that they did is they were very transparent. They didn't keep it in a black box for themselves. They shared it openly with their customers so that customers see in real time what's the performance of my fleet, what's the fuel consumption, what's the profitability of each flight, what is the maintenance schedule that is coming forward. They collaborated and worked interoperability with airplane manufacturers, with Boeing and Airbus, to provide to the customers, to the airlines, like a holistic view of the plane, a holistic maintenance schedule. All the employees were trained on that. They knew how to interpret the data. The maintenance teams knew exactly, okay, if one data variance is happening in a certain way, it has to be scheduled for maintenance in a certain time. So everyone was comfortable. Everyone was literate around how the data is to be used and how it's impacting their jobs, their KPIs, and their tasks. And then the last thing which created the most trust is they actually took a stake in the success of this business model. Because they're only charging by the hour the engine is operated, any failure, any downtime, any disruption to the flight schedule means Rolls-Royce doesn't get paid either because the plane is grounded, the engine is not running, so they can't charge the client. So it's a 30-year-old use case or case study. It has evolved over time with sensor technologies and IoT and all of this, but the model still holds true. And I think it's a great example how data is completely ingrained in the business strategy and how the trust is generated through all layers of partners, suppliers, to customers, to all benefit from this data strategy. So with that, I'm actually dead on time, which is great that I didn't overrun. So please, I've already taken it out of the budget, so I can't bring it back. So with that, I thank you for time. I want to take this opportunity as well to thank our partners one-to-one again for this continued partnership. We're always is our highlight at the end of the year to run this event and to come here. That's why we're coming here in force. So hopefully we can do the same again next year. So thank you very much.